Everyone loves an ice-cold beer, and civilization was built on beer. At least, it certainly helped. For thousands of years, beer has paid workers, funded kingdoms, made good life choices optional, and ended more marriages than Tinder. Not bad for a drink that probably began because somebody forgot about a bowl of wet grain. Since then, we've gone from accidental fermentation in the Stone Age to supermarket shelves packed with hazy IPAs that seemingly make the people who drink them better than everyone else. So pour yourself a pint and let's explore the surprisingly important history of the drink that's been quietly accompanying civilization from the very beginning. Our story begins around 12,000 years ago, near the end of the last ice age. Back then, nobody was trying to invent beer. In fact, nobody even knew what yeast was. To our ancestors, fermentation was less a scientific process and more a happy little surprise. As humans began gathering wild grains like barley and wheat, they quickly discovered they could soak them, crush them, and make a simple porridge. Occasionally, though, somebody would forget about a bowl. Wild yeast, floating through the air, would settle on the grain, begin feeding on its sugars, and quietly transform it into something rather more interesting. The result probably wasn't what we'd recognize as beer today. It would have been cloudy, full of bits, only mildly alcoholic, and almost certainly tasted more like fermented bread than a crisp lager. On the other hand, after a long day chasing mammoths around, perhaps nobody was being particularly picky. Whether this happened by accident or whether people deliberately encouraged fermentation once they realized the effects is still debated. What isn't debated is that once humanity discovered beer, there was absolutely no going back. As small farming communities grew into the world's first cities, beer quietly came along for the ride. Around 5,000 years ago, in ancient Mesopotamia, brewing had become so important that people were writing recipes onto clay tablets. That's right, one of humanity's earliest writing systems was being used, at least in part, to keep track of beer. History books tend to focus on kings, wars, and great monuments. Meanwhile, somebody was apparently making sure the brewery inventory was up to date. Beer wasn't just something people enjoyed after work. It was often part of their wages. Workers, labourers, and officials could all receive daily beer rations as payment, making it one of the earliest examples of a drink becoming an essential part of the economy. It was nutritious, relatively safe to drink, and made from crops that farming communities already depended upon. In other words, beer had evolved from a happy accident into serious business, and civilization was only just getting started. If Mesopotamia proved beer could support a civilization, ancient Egypt perfected the idea. Beer was everywhere. Rich or poor, young or old, almost everyone drank it. Not because the Egyptians were throwing one enormous party, although to be fair, they did enjoy a good festival. Beer was a staple food. It provided calories, nutrition, and hydration, and was brewed on an enormous scale throughout the kingdom. Perhaps most famously, workers building the Great Pyramids are believed to have received regular beer rations as part of their pay. So yes, there's a perfectly reasonable argument that one of the greatest engineering achievements in human history was, at least in part, fueled by beer. By now, brewing was no longer a lucky accident. It had become an industry, a craft, and before long, the rest of the world would catch on. As beer spread across Europe and beyond, it gained an unexpected reputation. Not just as a pleasant way to end the day, but sometimes as the safer thing to drink. Now, this is one of those historical claims that's often oversimplified. People in the past didn't spend every waking moment drinking beer because all the water was poisonous. Fresh springs, wells and streams could provide perfectly safe drinking water. The problem was that in growing towns and cities, clean water wasn't always guaranteed. Rubbish, sewage and animal waste had an annoying habit of ending up exactly where people collected their drinking water. Brewing, on the other hand, involved boiling the liquid before fermentation. That process, combined with the acidity and alcohol in the finished beer, made it much harder for harmful microbes to survive. For once, the healthier option came with a slight buzz. Many everyday beers were also surprisingly weak by modern standards. Some contained little more alcohol than today's low-alcohol beers, making them suitable for regular consumption alongside food. So, while beer didn't replace water, it became one of the most reliable drinks in a world where clean water couldn't always be taken for granted. And once again, it quietly helped civilization keep moving. By the Middle Ages, beer had found some rather unexpected master brewers: monks. Across Europe, monasteries became centres of brewing expertise, refining recipes that had been passed down for generations. Beer helped feed travellers, pilgrims, and local communities, while also providing an important source of income to keep the monasteries running. It's difficult to imagine a more wholesome business model. May God bless you. And would you like another pint? The monks didn't just brew more beer, they brewed better beer. They carefully recorded recipes, experimented with different ingredients, and improved consistency at a time when most brewing was still something of a lottery. One of the biggest changes was the growing use of hops. Before then, brewers flavoured beer with all sorts of herbs and spices, and the results could be unpredictable. Hops added a pleasant bitterness, balanced the sweetness of the malt, and, perhaps most importantly, helped preserve the beer for longer. That meant beer could be stored, transported, and traded far more easily than before. It was a small botanical change that would have an enormous impact on brewing for centuries to come. Then came the Industrial Revolution, and, like almost everything else, beer went industrial. Steam engines powered machinery that could grind more grain than ever before. Thermometers and hydrometers allowed brewers to measure their process with remarkable precision instead of relying on instinct. And advances in refrigeration meant beer could finally be brewed consistently all year round. For thousands of years, brewers had essentially been saying, "That feels about right." Science politely suggested there might be a better way. Railways and steamships carried beer across entire countries and eventually around the world. Breweries grew from small local operations into vast industrial businesses capable of producing millions of litres every year. Styles that had once belonged to a single town or region suddenly found themselves crossing borders and oceans. Beer was no longer just a local tradition, it had become a global industry. And somehow, it all traced its roots back to somebody forgetting about a bowl of wet grain. Of course, humanity being humanity, we eventually decided to ban it. In 1920, the United States introduced Prohibition, making the production and sale of alcoholic drinks illegal across the country. The idea was simple: less alcohol, fewer social problems. As it turned out, humans are remarkably creative when you tell them they can't have something. Illegal bars, known as speakeasies, sprang up across the country. Bootleggers built vast smuggling networks, organised crime made fortunes supplying people who had absolutely no intention of giving up their Friday night pint. Far from killing beer, Prohibition simply drove much of it underground. When the ban was finally repealed in 1933, breweries returned, and beer once again became part of everyday life. Then, towards the end of the 20th century, something unexpected happened. People stopped asking, "What's the cheapest beer?" and started asking, "What else have you got?" End. The answer, it turned out, was quite a lot. Over the past few decades, thousands of small breweries have appeared around the world, each putting their own spin on one of humanity's oldest drinks. The craft beer movement brought brewing back to its roots: small batches, bold flavours, and a willingness to experiment with just about anything. Today, you can find beers flavoured with coffee, chocolate, chili, oysters, fruit, smoked malt, and ingredients that would probably leave our Stone Age ancestors deeply confused. Mind you, they'd probably still drink them. Modern brewing has become part science, part art, and occasionally part chemistry experiment. Whether your drink of choice is a crisp lager, a rich stout, a traditional bitter, or an IPA with tasting notes that require a degree in horticulture, there's almost certainly a beer for you. From a forgotten bowl of wet grain to an industry worth hundreds of billions of pounds, beer has travelled a very long way indeed. And through it all, it's been quietly accompanying civilization every step of the way.